Good morning. Welcome to our S24 American election special. With only 3 states remaining to be called, former Vice President Joseph R. Biden is poised to become the 46th President of the United States of America, unseating incumbent President Donald J. Trump. The election period has been characterized as one of the most divisive, as well as its claim to fame for separating and being polarized in American politics. And the voting period has been marred by accusations from the president of fraud concerning mail-in ballots. As S24, it is our mandate to be at the source of the story. Therefore, we are bringing you expert opinions from industry experts in communication and economics and finance on what a Biden win means for Zambia and the world at large. We're joined by Ngosa Chungu, a communications expert, as well as Munyumba Mutwale, an economics and financial expert, to help us analyze in depth the way forward, what is a very, very close race, to say the least. Good morning. Let me start with you, Ngosa. Ladies first, as it were, as a communications expert. What does a Biden win mean on the larger scheme of Zambia-US relations?
I think a Biden win means change. Right now, everything is polarized. A lot of people are saying that this has only happened now, but this is the culmination of something that has been really boiling over for the last 20 years. And with everything that's going on with the coronavirus in 2020 and the devastating effect that it's had in the US and in Europe, but not necessarily in parts of the world that they thought it would happen, like here in Africa, where we seem to have been able to get things under control, even in the worst countries like South Africa, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement that has now gone global. The Americans are going to use this opportunity to regain their place as the leader of the free world and the bastion that the world looks at. Because right now, the world, and particularly here in Africa, we're like, no, you can't tell us anything. And that has been reflected in also the recent elections that have happened around Africa, in Guinea, in the Ivory Coast. I mean, recently Zimbabwe has even said that, you know, the US cannot advise us on democracy because of what has gone on in the last couple of years, and in particular what has happened in leading up to this election.
All right. Well, look, when it comes to the argument about the U.S. talking about democracy, because of course they've got their own system, which is not necessarily based on the majority vote, so to say. And you spent some time in the U.S., in the state of California, a state that holds 55 electoral college points. And you do have an understanding of the electoral process there. What do you think it took for Biden to capture states that were originally thought to be Republican strongholds, Arizona, as we know, possibly being one of those, as the numbers are still coming in, but Arizona being a shock in the sense that it is very traditionally Republican. This time around, showing a bit of move towards the Democrat side.
This has been a very anomalous election. People would say that 2016 was an anomalous election, but this has been worse because of the global dynamics with the coronavirus, as well as what is just going on internally that has bubbled up to the surface and has boiled over. So I think to look at things and say, oh, things were traditionally Republican or Democratic is a little too simplistic. A lot of people are voting for change because so much has happened, and the Americans are really, really shocked. What's interesting is, having been through several election cycles since the year 2001 in the US, I don't even think that Americans themselves actually understand their own process, right? There is this exceptionalism that Americans believe in, and they believe in it so implicitly that they just think that everything is going to work like clockwork. And so many things have not worked like clockwork in the last couple of years, and then 2020 has just added all sorts of extra onto what has been a very confusing time. And so a lot of people are voting because they just can't take it anymore. So for a lot of people, it's not even necessarily about being Republican or Democrat. It's about, we just don't want Trump.
Well, I agree with you on the point that you're saying a lot of things have actually played out that were not necessarily predicted. I mean, 2020 continues to be the year of unprecedented results. Speaking of results, usually they're out within about a 24-hour period of the following morning. The last time it actually took longer than that was in 2000, where the Supreme Court actually had to take even months to actually release those results. And the suspense is definitely something. But let's say Joe Biden does carry the day, all right? It is very likely that we might see a Democratic president. What does this mean on a global scale in terms of trade, climate conversations, and what has been very, very pronounced this year, racial justice as well?
Well, Biden is going to have to start rebuilding because, in the last year, Trump has removed himself from the Paris Agreement for climate change. He's put in the 1-year notice. America is the only country that can remove itself from the World Health Organization. He's done that. And then, the global Black Lives Matter movement really is a culmination of everybody thinking that racial equality had been achieved because Obama had been elected, and with all the stories that surrounded him, stirring up racist undertones that had been largely underground, them bubbling to the surface, that giving Trump momentum, him using that and social media to continue to stir that up, and all of that has now created a very, very toxic environment, both locally and globally. So the way that people see America is not the same way that they saw them 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 20 years ago. So Biden has a huge task. The stock markets have, been yo-yoing for years, and in this year, because of everything else that is going on, have yo-yoed even more than usual. So just trying to inspire confidence in the world, saying, look, we had a bit of a wobbly, but, we're still here. We're still a bastion of democracy. We're still a bastion of freedom, equality, racial justice. It's not going to be a quick fix. This is a very, very, very long road. And it might not just take Biden. It may take several presidents in order to restore America to where it was and its standing in the world.
All right, so let's talk about that restoration of America's reputation and relationships. Bring it back here to the Zambian context. Now, you did mention that the U.S. Under Trump and his announcement is possibly the only country to say that we are not going to be part of the World Health Organization. All right. So his announcement to remove themselves as participants in the WHO under the United Nations, that has a huge impact on Zambia, because as we know, the U.S. remaining the single most donating country when it comes to healthcare. I mean, if you are going to now have a conversation about, for example, Zambian ARVs, it's very interesting that we still have not put an official ambassador in what is the nation with arguably the biggest economy in the world, but also with such relevance when it comes to things like its participation in the local health sector and previous relationships as well. What's your take on that one? Because I don't know too many countries receiving donor funds from the US, all right, especially under health, and they don't have an ambassador. Zambia finding itself in a unique position. What do you think about that one, Ngosa?
What I think about that is everybody's gone rogue. And everybody's taken this opportunity to do what they want.
I mean,
right?
We're still going to take their money.
Yes, we'll take their money,
yeah.
but yeah, we're also testing the waters. We're trying to see if we can be autonomous. You can't tell us what to do or try and set the terms of how we engage with all of these different people. And quite honestly, I think it's a very, very scary time, because we do not have robust systems and institutions and fallback plans to mitigate if the U.S. then decide, oh well, you have decided not to engage with us diplomatically. Why should we then engage with you? Why should we help you? And really, the message has been America first, right? And so if that continues, right, then Zambia is in a very, very sticky situation. Yes, we may have been able to, curb the coronavirus, but we have a lot of issues in our healthcare system that just we cannot function without donor aid. We just can't.
So you're of the opinion that a Biden victory would actually maybe smoothen relationships that are ongoing right now between Zambia and the U.S.?
I don't know necessarily, because it also depends on how they decide to come to come at us, because they might be like, everybody thought that they could just do whatever they want in the last couple of years, but we're coming back and we're gonna lay down the law, and this is how it's going to be, and we may not react favorably to that. I don't think that. I think that it would be foolish to assume that a Biden presidency would suddenly mean that everything will go back to normal. Whatever was the old normal no longer exists, and we don't really know what the new normal will be.
All right, Munyumba, as an economist, you're more sensible than to be a betting man. But just to use this term, your money is on a Trump win. And the implications of what a Biden win would also mean to Zambia. I would like to find that out from you, even though your money is on Trump. Let's start with what a Biden win would mean for Zambia, according to you.
Right, a Biden win at the end of the day would actually mean that as Zambia, we're going back to multilateralism. We're going back to the global economy, and we're going back to effectively what I like to call the global plantation, which is pretty much what we've signed ourselves up for and pretty much eradicated any hopes of freedom. So I understand that everyone believes that we have to somehow bow to the global system in order for us to somehow go up to ascend to a new level of livelihood, or to improve our livelihood. But the biggest problem that Zambia specifically has faced under that global system is we own nothing. We don't own our minds, we don't own our businesses, we don't own anything. And because we don't own anything, we've gotten used to the fact that foreign investors are going to come in and do everything for us. And that's the problem I have with the Biden victory. Biden victory brings back the global system and the global order. That brings back the worst inequalities and the worst parts of Zambia that I've always remembered. This is in the inequality based on the fact that we are a blessed country, but own nothing and seem to not be able to do anything. Now, in his clumsy and probably not on purpose way, Donald Trump kind of shook that system and took that away. And that's what he did. And on top of that, he knocked China. So the Biden victory is going to bring back China. Bring them back to loaning us into the ground, bring them back to flashing money in front of corrupt individuals if they can, and bring them back to throwing us into always being dependent on them and living a life as if we cannot do anything ourselves. People, we have to get past this point that we can't build anything ourselves. We will never develop as Zambia. If we constantly think everything always has to be donor funded and we can have donations. But the problem of Zambia is that we're donor and investor reliant. And that is the problem that I have with the Biden presidency, because it brings back reliance on the global system. So yes, I do believe that we should get back to a rugged form of actually trying to build ourselves, because there is no great nation out there that has actually risen to the top or risen to a good stage by actually relying on people and nickel and diming its way all the way through. We can't go on that way. And I actually think that it's a good thing for Zambia to have less investment and actually less aid being poured at us. And that's what unfortunately, I see. The second part, Chi, of a Biden victory is that I'm looking at the oil markets as well. Zambia is in a tender place right now with our currency. Joe Biden wants to bring back that climate conversation, which somehow, if you look at it very carefully with that Paris Accord, it always seems to skirt China. China is there firing up 90% of its electricity using coal, and then just promising the world that one day it's going to turn to solar, just flashing those images on Facebook for us while it's busy pumping coal through its system and making sure that it's the biggest polluter on this world. And the second fastest growing polluter is also Indian factories as well. Now, no one is touching those things, but we're going to have the Biden conversation about energy regulation and increased energy regulation, not on a local state from America, but on a global state. So you're going to say goodbye to all those small shale players who are actually helping curb carbon with natural gas. You're going to say goodbye to all the small oil players on the market, and they're going to pull America back from being the number one oil producer to the number two oil producer and create an oil shortage. This was what they were planning on doing. And then the oil price goes up. Now, with the 21 kwacha dollar, and possibly even a 28 kwacha dollar, as Rand Merchant has said, or possibly looking down the gun of a $60, $70 oil price under a Biden administration, because his whole goal is to get rid of the glut in the oil market and to tighten up the oil markets. And then I'm going to be looking at a higher pump price for my people and therefore inflation. So forgive me for being an economic nationalist on this one, but I'm looking at I'm trying to look at my people owning their businesses, owning their economy and building their economy from scratch. And secondly, I'm also looking at not trying to punish my people with higher oil prices.
Okay, on that point of our own people and you being an economic nationalist, it's very interesting, your sentiments that actually a Biden victory would mean less self-sustainability. But let's call a spade a spade. AGOA was a democratic initiative that was instituted, at least in theory, to try and see Zambian products, Zambian goods, Zambian businesses, Zambian individuals start penetrating the trade market with the US. Under Donald J. Trump, however, we've seen trade restrictions, we've seen trade adjustments, but surely is AGOA coming back under a Biden victory, in your opinion? And was it ever a good thing to begin with? Because it sounds to me like the Democrats probably had a plan for us to be self-sustainable to the point of even contributing towards their trade. What of AGOA?
Gee, that's the beautiful thing about democratic policies. They're always wonderful on paper. It's always great theory. But then when you put it in practice, it always relies on donor funding. That's the thing. You have to get the donor funding out of the system. Whether you have to do it slowly or fully, but you have to, even if, unfortunately, a lot of these programs, and I've seen it, I've taken entrepreneurs through this kind of stuff. Even if you want to try and get them through this, the reliance is always going to be, in order to get started, I need a donation, I need an investment. The mindset of the Zambian people has to be adjusted by a removal of aid. So unfortunately, as I said, as clumsy as President Trump was, and I honestly don't think he was looking for self-reliance of Zambia. I'm just being honest. I don't think that's what his goal was. But to cut aid from Zambia, he was, and to trim aid, he was leading us to the thing of we had to start thinking for ourselves. We had to start thinking what happens when the rug gets removed from us. When he bashed China and then cut their ability to lend to us, we had to start thinking, okay, guys, what happens when the debt train and the gravy boat finally cuts down? These are the conversations we've started having. Now, Chi, you've also got to look at this from an African perspective. For the first time since 2018, this is why I keep saying you got to look at a Biden and Trump president against each other. You've got to look at what happened after the trade war. You actually had China unable to finance bad regimes or corrupt regimes like they used to do across Africa. And you started having this little flurry of African revolutions effectively happening because a lot of regimes started running out of money and they started actually having debt problems and cash problems, which was the kind of result that we needed in order for the people of Africa to start having that conversation of self-reliance and saying, okay, guys, we need to actually get this out of our system. We cannot be a dependent economy, and not just at a Zambian level, at an African level. So yes, on theory, they did put that in place and Trump cut the funding for it. But the question is this, Chief. Why do you need funding to be self-reliant? It defeats its own purpose. I am funding you so that you can be on yourself, or so that you can be. This is defeating itself. Self-reliance is a mentality.
Can I just ask you a question? You're talking about I feel like you're creating this false dichotomy between the fact of the matter is we shouldn't actually be relying on who becomes president, whether it's Trump or Biden. That self-reliance needs to happen regardless. Right? So for me, the thing that frustrates me the most is that we decide who we are going to be based on who is the president of the United States.
Well, they are the biggest economy.
Yes, they are the biggest economy, but the fact of the matter is, right?
Yeah.
The system is broken. Even Trump throwing in a spade and drowning the swamp. In the end, it's still beneficial to America and not to anybody else. So for us as Zambians, right? Yeah, if we truly want to get ourselves out of this mess, to stop inflation, to stop the stop the kwacha tanking and everything, we have to make hard decisions ourselves. We need to be leaders, and quite frankly, we need to be ready to suffer, because it's not going to come without suffering, which has happened all around the world. I don't know why we think that we're special and somehow we can just not go through that process. We need to do that, and yes, that will mean less aid. That will mean facing some hard truths. But the fact of the matter is, America will not be able to save us. Our problems go beyond whatever happens in America. Our problems stem from the fact that we have not, as a country, looked at ourselves. We decided that we became independent in 1964, that everything happened with the freedom fighters, and a lot of people have actually lost hope, and they think that this is how things are always going to be, which is not the case. As was stated earlier, we are ridiculously blessed with natural resources, right? Except we don't own anything, right? Why aren't we making the hard decisions to take that stuff back? Why aren't we holding our leaders accountable? As citizens, we are not exercising our rights and our power, right? And that will not come from America. That will come from us. So, regardless of whether Trump or Biden win, right? Yeah. Neither option is the best option for Zambia, in my opinion.
All right. So with regards to that, what's very interesting is both of you are exposing your parental skills, because what you're both describing is tough love. All right, in the sense that you're both saying we need a situation where aid is cut and we start looking at self-sustainability, and maybe that's the wake-up call we need. Now, but you described it as a quote unquote clumsy fortune. So to say that, yes, Trump has said America first. He will continue to do so should he retain the presidency. And that would obviously mean less concentration and less focus. We've already talked about that big announcement he made saying, WHO, I'm not throwing money that way. We know how much we rely on US money when it comes to our health sector and the like. So this tough love, that's what you are both endorsing, regardless of who goes through?
Yes.
Yeah, let me actually put just one more thing on what Ngosa said. Yes, 100% yes, we do need to go through a period of tough love, because there is no nation that has actually risen without that period of suffering. Every nation that is where it is has suffered and has overcome suffering, because that is the only way to get to the top. These nations, China, America, Israel, the UK, all of these people have gone through times of suffering where they've actually now taken ownership of themselves. So I think on that perspective, we actually do need to do that. And like I said, by some clumsy fortune, President Trump did it. Now, I'm gonna agree again with Ngosa on this point. It is not us, we shouldn't get to the mentality of saying, if President Trump becomes president, then we can continue. The only problem I'm saying is this: Africa is struggling, and Zambia as well is struggling from a drug problem, and the drug is foreign aid and foreign investment. Now, in order to get someone into rehabilitation, first you kind of have to take the drug away, because it's difficult to rehabilitate someone while they're still on drugs. And with China moving around and the global economy and global powers moving around, flashing money at us, it's very difficult to get us off that drug. So this was the kind of wake-up call.
I was about to say, haven't we just found ourselves a new dealer in China to carry on this drug analogy?
So I think that's the point I was looking at. But the thing is that it is not that we should depend on a Trump presidency. We still have the opportunity to wake up ourselves. We should start talking to our leaders in that fashion of saying, hold on, can you start balancing budgets? Can you stop borrowing us to the hems? Because my children are going to have to pay for the debt you're racking up, like you're balling out a club or something.
All right, so
spending the sky.
Yeah, so we'll put the drug conversation on hold for now before DEC comes knocking at the S24 doors. Biden to capture states that were originally thought to be Republican strongholds like Arizona. It looks very likely that we are actually seeing unprecedented results. I know results are still coming in, but some of them have certainly shocked what were previous schools of thought and previous predictions. What's your take on that one, Munyumba?
Well, when it comes to Arizona, that was expected. And the reason was that was the fallout with John McCain. The McCain Republicans were really strong in Arizona, and that was the dynasty that actually spoke out against Donald Trump. So Donald Trump's problems with John McCain kind of now flowed into that. And you even had the McCain family publicly endorsing Joe Biden. And also remember one thing about Arizona: they've had one of the largest growths also in the Latin American population, or in terms of the influx of people as well. Now they obviously didn't vote, but that population also did vote quite strong in favor of Biden. You did see it in the numbers, 2 to 3 did come up. Though Donald Trump did better with Latinos and Black people during this election, but his Latin American vote, or his Latino vote, also did quite well. But in Arizona specifically, it has struggled. Nevada is the one, I think, that has caught everyone off guard. Nevada is also strong Republican. It has been taken away because only Las Vegas is usually a Democrat place in Nevada, but the rest of Nevada usually votes Republican. Now, the taking of places like the one I think that shocked a lot of people was with Joe Biden speaking strongly against oil and gas, and saying that he's going to phase out oil and gas. Michigan, Ohio actually still went to Trump, but Michigan and Wisconsin, who are oil and gas states as well to a degree, also now going towards Biden did help. But I can tell you, Chi, I think we after looking at this very carefully, especially the act of mail-in ballots, one of the things you can see is mail-in ballots also encouraged youth voting. And 64% of the youth voted with Joe Biden, also because you've got media and Hollywood support behind that. You've got the social media companies also pumping out a pro-Democrat message a lot. So because of that, or leaning towards that, so because of all of that, you have the youth, and especially the universities. Universities are also strongly pro-Democrat. So that messaging got really well. And because the youth, one of the things that you do find with the young people in America is they don't go to the polls. They don't physically go to the polls. But an old mail-in ballot would have been good for them. So that's one of the things you found. You actually got higher participation of young voters, even though Trump has improved in young voters. But the quantum and skew of young voters finally played against a Republican, simply because young voters don't come out in numbers. But this time, the numbers helped. And that's where the mail-in ballots also had their advantage for Joe Biden. But taking some of these Republican states, as I said, it's the youth vote also that came in quite strong, especially through the mail-in ballot system.
Well, we're a nation that is over 80% youth, and of that 80%, a lot of those youth are actually eligible to vote. What is very interesting, bringing it back to the Zambian context, is the fact that, as you've said, Munyumba, America traditionally does not concentrate its efforts on making the youth go out and vote. In fact, the last time I remember it was the Rock the Vote campaign, and this is where it leads to a communication question to you, Ngosa. The Rock the Vote campaign, which brought Bill Clinton into office. I remember it was all flashy. MTV was involved in that. It was very young and hip to vote at the time. As has been the case now, we've seen sports leagues, which of course a lot of youth aspire to actually, live the life of these athletes. And you mentioned the superstars. From a communication point of view, Ngosa, what has the narrative been for both camps, and who has this appealed to? Who have they focused on, and what have been some of the communication trends that you have observed?
Well, the Democrats have really tapped into the protests this year and the global Black Lives Matter movement, and how that has then fostered this community online where people are just really talking about how the system really is broken. So the way that Trump has been talking about the system being broken and draining the swamp and all of that has been very divisive, right? And it hasn't been inclusive. It's been targeting very specific people, and it's been targeting what some are calling white supremacists, whereas the Democrats have really tried to focus on the young, on what are considered the woke, and just trying to give a much different picture. And I think that actually also is reflected across the world, here in Africa, as you've seen in Nigeria with the protests that have started there, and then also just all the hashtags that have been trending in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Cameroon, in Ghana, but a whole a whole lot of issues. And I think that is also happening here in Zambia. I think that youth are becoming very engaged. A lot of people are connecting on social media. People are hungry for information, and people aren't happy with the status quo. And we have an election next year, and the two front runners really need to think about the way that they communicate, because the way that they communicate is not in tune with the average Zambian. The average Zambian is young. The average Zambian is tired. The average Zambian wants change. The average Zambian wants to have a better life. And the way things are going, it doesn't look good, right? Either for the incumbent or for the person who is trying to replace them. I think there is this. I think that our vote.
It's tough times globally. Anybody at the helm of that seat is going to inherit consequences.
But our vote
global
is taken for granted, right? I think the incumbent thinks that no, Zambians will vote and they'll just vote for me because I'm here. And I think that I think that HH thinks that we just want change, so we'll just pick him. I don't think either of them are making the effort to really understand who we are, where we are, and what we want. And we're seeing what is going on around the world, and we're being emboldened. We've seen things that we never thought we'd see. Who thought that we'd be able to, that youth would be able to pull off an online protest? We had, police on the street searching for these young people who were protesting the status quo, only to find out that they had mobilized themselves online, right? That we're in very unprecedented times, and even though it's the things may seem pretty bleak, I'm actually pretty optimistic. I think that there is a global revolution that is sweeping over the earth in waves. And
you think the youth are behind that?
Yes,
basically.
and I think that the youth are behind it.
Okay.
And I think the Democrats tapped into that, and that's why you saw a record number. I mean, how much was it? Over 60% of the vote was in by voting day,
right?
Because youth for the first time were using mail-in ballots, we're using any means necessary to to vote and circumvent the system.
Okay.
And I think that what will happen here in Zambia in the next year is very, very exciting, and it will definitely be youth led. There's already rumblings, and watch out.
Well, interesting there, but also going back now to a communication, and maybe perhaps we might actually call this a marketing angle. I want to talk about the personalities and what has actually been amplified of these two candidates, all right? Some people criticizing Joe Biden and saying, well, he's simply not fiery enough to take on what is a very fiery Donald Trump. Evidence of this was, of course, the debates, where I would say Joe Biden was basically bullied in the first one into submission. Let's talk a bit about how these characters have been marketed in the US and, of course, to the world as well.
Well, Trump is very charismatic. Trump, basically, I would say that Trump is the opposite of Obama, right? Trump uses a different kind of tactic in just as an effective way in order to appeal to his base, right? Biden is, he's very calm. He's not very he's not as charismatic as those two characters. However, right, Biden still had Obama, and I don't think Trump betted on Obama deciding to go on the campaign trail in the last few weeks, because if you watch Obama, you can tell that he had a lot to say. He had things on his chest, right? Things happened to him in the last 8 years.
That's my question, Gosa. Was it,
it wasn't Biden. Obama just came out and was like, what? I am not, I'm not president anymore, right? I'm just going to come for this man.
Yeah. But that was the thing, because we saw a lot in terms of Obama's resurfacing into the public spotlight, obviously to back the presidential candidate, Joe Biden. But wasn't he just a bit too cool for the person who were trying to focus? I mean, just last week, he was on the basketball court hitting three-pointers, and people were going on about how cool a president he was, forgetting the fact that we're supposed to focus on the guy who is trying to run for office right now. I mean, basically, weren't those big shoes to fill, bringing back the Obama swag at a time where we're supposed to find out what this individual Biden is all about and has to offer, and build his own personality.
Well, no, well, the thing is that like Trump uses any means necessary. So the Democrats were just like, you know what? We know that Biden can't go up against Trump. That's not gonna happen. Like Trump knows how to like shut a person down. We saw that with Hillary, right? And Hillary is a much stronger character than Biden is, and she wasn't able to do it. So they knew that, trying to, change Biden's character in this last year was just not going to happen, right? And so, fall back on Obama, and that's what they did. And the man was clearly happy to do it. He really has enjoyed himself, right? And who can blame them? They want to win. This is a contest, right? So if you have a tool in your box that you can use, right? Yeah, you're going to use it because you know that the other side is not going to do you any favors.
All right, very interesting there. Cult of personality, Munyumba, your take on the characteristics of these two individuals and how media has carried it.
Look, looking at it this way, Donald Trump did get into power being a personality. That is what he did. He circumvented the Republican machinery, and he literally just became the personality that overtook. That's how he actually got into the candidacy in the first place in 2015. He used his personality. Now, Obama is a personality, but in a different way. So that's what you have to understand. So now, if you're looking at the two most popular presidents of the Republican and the Democrat parties in recent time, it has been Trump. Trump has been the very popular Republican president, even though Republican numbers have dwindled and people have gone into becoming independents. Same thing was happening under Obama as well. People were leaving the Democrats and becoming independents. Obama actually also was one of the more popular, especially youth popular presidents. Look, they were the same person in terms of their social media presence, in terms of their ability to connect directly with voters. That is one of the things you'll actually find, especially about that. Now, Joe Biden is unfortunately a cardboard cutout politician. All right, that is pretty much the kind of guy you take out of a book and then you just throw him in there and say that's pretty much what a politician is supposed to look like and sound like, even though it's the kind of guy who will promise you 10,000 things, do 3 of them, and then you're going to say he speaks well, and that's going to be the president. That's going to be basically presidential material, and that's pretty much the standard. But what happened was you got to a point recently now where people were tired of politicians who say and don't do. People just got tired of that, and this is what Donald Trump's vote was about, and to an extent, even Obama's vote was about that. It was a rogue vote against the system. So, I mean, think about it this way. Donald Trump also was the only guy who's ever ascended to presidency who's never been in the party system. He's never been an actual party leader. He's never been a congressperson, never been a mayor, a local council, nothing. Literally, this was his first public sector job ever. And presidency was it. So that was kind of like the shock to the system that the people wanted you to feel. That was what they wanted. So in terms of charismatic people, the only person who could have taken Donald Trump on in terms of charisma probably would have been Bernie Sanders. But unfortunately, you saw on Super Tuesday the way the system, and that's the thing that Joe Biden represents, the system of politics. The way you had Pete Buttigieg just drop out. You had all these other all the candidates just literally drop out and line up behind Biden. You know that there were phone calls made in the background saying drop out and line up, fall back. Everybody has got to be in right behind this man, because now we're all going to rally behind him, because Super Tuesday was his to win. And that was the point that they put forward, because they didn't want any interference. They didn't want any problems. So in terms of personality, of course, Joe Biden did not have personality, but he had the system. But because it was a time of personality, they had to send out Obama. It was literally like, I don't know if you've watched the movie Weekend at Bernie's, where they were carrying around that guy that passed
the dead
away.
Guy. Wow.
That is literally what the Joe Biden campaign was. It was Obama, Michelle Obama, all the past presidents carrying Joe Biden's body basically into the White House.
So you're saying Joe Biden should have had T-shirts printed, vote Joe Biden, his friends with the cool kids. All right, interesting.
Pretty much.
He was in the basement half the time, and Obama was the one talking for it.
All right, now I'm going to go back to a quote where you say Joe Joe Biden represents the system? Do you feel the same way, Ngosa? Because 2016, let's go back. One might have accused Hillary Clinton of the same thing. Hillary Clinton was a tried and tested politician. She had rose through the ranks of public office. And then you just had this so-called individual who represents, quote unquote, the average Joe. Well, average Joe if you are a billionaire. But point being, he was not your typical politician. And at the time, that's what America wanted, was to say, we need to break the system, we need to challenge the system. Now, what is very interesting as well is Joe Biden has also criticized the same system that, according to you, Munyumba, he actually embodies. So, you know, what is Joe Biden's message? Is he saying he's going to reestablish the system, or is he, because of course he's going up against an incumbent, saying that if anything, I'm going to change the system? So what is he actually trying to put out?
Well, I mean, the Democrats have been pretty weak on, saying that they want to change the system. Their messaging isn't quite there, but at the same time, Americans have decided, look, we tried something different with Trump and it hasn't actually really worked. Because, I mean, over 200,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus, something that they just didn't think would happen in their own country. And they've had someone who has just decided that this pandemic does not exist and has been dismantling all of the systems that that existed, from the pandemic response team to now removing Dr. Fauci. All of these things, it sort of had people start to turn and say, look, okay, so we didn't like the system. Right? We picked someone who we thought would remove the system. That didn't actually happen. So what we need.
But he's also a defender of the system at the same time.
Yes.
He's also a defender of the system at the same time.
Right, because
Democrats are the ones flooding the streets. I mean, he's talked about it himself. How he's talking about Democrats are the ones that are causing anarchy. Anarchy represents a breakdown of the system. So this individual who apparently doesn't follow the system has been seen to defend the system. That's why I'm saying, like, what message are these candidates trying to put out? Are you trying to maintain the system, or are you trying to change the system? Because it seems as though they're changing their narrative at different junctions.
Right, but I think that's also because they're trying to see where the American people are at. Right, and that has been unclear, and that has been clear with how close this election has been. Right, even the American people themselves aren't really sure what they want. Do they want to go back to the old system? Do they want to let Trump to continue to dismantle it, or do they want some sort of change? And is Biden and his party the people to do that? Right, so that's why this election has been so contentious, why it's so important, and what's going to happen in the next couple of months is going to be very interesting, because the Supreme Court is now highly conservative. Will it follow the letter of the law, or will it be partisan? That is unclear, because hey, somebody was sworn in the middle of the night to have all sorts of crazy things have happened, right?
Oh, right.
And the plan that Biden has for the first 180 days, people are like, oh my goodness, if you're going to go at that pace, nothing is ever going to change. Things are going to get worse before they get better. So it's a very, very interesting time in American democracy,
right.
In American standing in the world, and the way that we understand who the American people are. Because even we as the world are like, who are you? Because we have Republicans in one state saying keep counting the votes, keep counting your votes. In another state, you have them camping out saying stop counting the votes, stop counting the votes.
Right.
Even they themselves are confused. The Democrats, who knows what they're doing?
Well, very interesting, and who knows where it will turn, because uncertainty is still in the air when it comes to the numbers. It's down to the wire. Now, Munyumba, I'm going to have you close out this conversation with the next 30 seconds, please. And by the the way, make sure you do join us in a couple of hours after our midday news. We'll be crossing over live to the US, talking to some experts as we continue the S24 coverage of the US elections. And in that, we're also going to discuss issues of the Senate seats as we talk to some people on the ground in the USA during election period. Munyumba, your closing words, please.
Look, at the end of the day, this has been an election, and I say it again, this wasn't an election based on left versus right. Donald Trump wasn't even a proper Republican, to be honest. The guy was a Democrat most of his life. So the reality, I'll say, is this. This was a debate against globalism versus multilateralism. And just to add one little caveat, I think one of the points there, one of the reasons I called Joe Biden the system candidate is look who his donors were. Most of his donors were big corporations, big institutions, and the big names, the big Hollywood, the big producers, the big Wall Street was behind him, big oil was behind him. That's what I mean by the system of governance. So it was a debate against whether the global status quo system is going to continue, whether the youth are finally going to get their voice, or whether you just had a Black Lives Matter, global Black Lives Matter movement hijacked, as usual, just like the Arab Spring was, by people who have different views. And in 10 years' time, we're going to be back here complaining, saying nothing changed, because instead of having a revolution go through, it was actually hijacked. So that's what I'm looking at.
All right, thank you very much, Munyumba Mutwale there, an economist and S24 contributor, as well as Ngosa Chungu, who is, of course, a communications expert, as well as S24 contributor. Thank you very much. I guess it's back to our calculators and TV screens as we continue to monitor the race. Thank you for joining us. This has been an S24 U.S. election special brought to you by S24, your first and only Zambian 24-hour news channel that continues to be at the source of your story. Midday news coming up soon. Thank you very much.